Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman and thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, we're kicking off Black History Month with a look at how Black history is taught in schools and how some say it should be taught. The laws and limitations of life after prison. That's the topic of this week's Black Voices Book Club selection. And a throwback from an incisive 1968 interview with actor and comedian Godfrey Cambridge for WTTW's groundbreaking show, Our People. First off tonight, last August, State Representative LaShawn Ford issued a call to abolish teaching history in Illinois schools, citing concerns that the way the subject is taught in its present form foments white supremacy and racism. Here's some of what he had to say then.
When it comes to teaching history in Illinois, we need to end the miseducation of Illinoisans. It costs so much to print books, and it costs so much of taxpayers to continue to pay for their kids and their children to go to school to be miseducated.
And joining us now with more on how and what we teach our children about Black history are Maureen Totsko-Locknane, Executive Director of the nonprofit organization Facing History and Ourselves, and State Representative LaShawn Ford, whose West Side district includes much of the Austin community. He's also a former Chicago public school teacher. Welcome both of you to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. Representative Ford, let's start with you, please. What are your concerns with how history and specifically Black history are being taught in schools?
Well, Brandis, thank you for having us. And I'll get right to it. I think the most important thing that we have to recognize when we talk about history is not inclusive, and Black history only really starts with slavery, when Blacks were enslaved. And that's a problem. People should know Black heritage and the culture of Black people, and our history doesn't do that in our schools in America.
Maureen Locknane, your organization creates resources for teachers to use in addressing these difficult subjects like racism, anti-Semitism, and prejudice. How does your organization's approach differ from traditional approaches?
First of all, Brandis, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on, and it's an honor to be on with Representative Ford. To answer your question, Facing History believes that Black history is American history. It is our history, and that all educators have a responsibility to teach that history in its fullness year round. I think that what Representative Ford is interested in is right in line with the goals of Facing History.
Representative Ford, you wrote and sponsored a 2018 House resolution in the Illinois General Assembly that created a Black History Task Force to study just this, and I know they shared some of their research in a late January meeting. What has that task force learned?
That task force has learned the curriculum, the materials that's being used in the over 852 school districts in Illinois. And what we're learning is that there's a need to change the standards in Illinois of how we teach history, and there's a need to change the textbooks and curriculum that we're using to teach history in Illinois.
And Maureen, what are some of the challenges with teaching, very difficult subjects like slavery and the Holocaust?
I think that the challenges are that so many teachers are not equipped to have those types of difficult conversations with their students. Facing History's approach is really to help educators have a clearer understanding of how their identities interplay with the identities of the students that they're teaching. And we provide for the teachers tools in which they can begin to have those difficult conversations and create safe spaces for teachers and students to really connect on these challenging topics.
So let's talk about a specific example, the civil rights era of 1950s and 60s. Representative Ford, as we mentioned, you were a history teacher for CPS. What kind of materials and curricula were you given at the time to teach about that era? And do you think those were the right tools?
You know, I'm ashamed to say that the tools that I had to use were centered around the standards that the state of Illinois required. Now, as a teacher, I could bring in extra curricular activities to change the narrative a little bit, but I had to spend the time on task teaching the way the state required it. And no, it did not provide the necessary tools for me to teach in the classroom the way history should be taught. And I'll just say that Neil Steinberg just wrote something that was very, very powerful. He said, history isn't here to make you feel good. And that's exactly what our history does for people that read it. It tries to make us feel good, and we have to change that.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're referencing Neil Steinberg's column in the Sun-Times. Maureen, what sorts of materials does Facing History offer to teach about the civil rights time period, and how do you develop them?
In particular, around the civil rights era, we have a curriculum that focuses in on the Little Rock Nine and the amazing things that those young people did in 1957 to bring the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus Board of Education into reality. I think that is such a powerful curriculum because it connects with young people. It helps young people see that they have agency, that they don't have to wait to be able to vote in order to have an impact on society. Those 9 young people in Arkansas were able to really affect change. And I'll just add to that in addition to that, in Chicago, we have a supplement that helps young people understand in 1963, the student boycott of Chicago public schools. So when we're thinking about the civil rights era, I think it is so important to connect these histories to young people, to help them to understand what is happening in the world today, to make them feel like that they also have agency, that they can make change.
And Maureen, sticking with you for a second, last year we all had, a true life lesson in living history with the events that happened after the death of George Floyd. Even CPS issued a curriculum to talk about police brutality. How should teachers approach discussing these modern day events, these modern day parts of history?
Actually, I think that this is something that Facing History really specializes in that one of the things that we encourage teachers to do is when they're thinking about current events, to also make connections to history. That sometimes if you begin with a history lesson and allow young people to really think about and begin to make those connections, then you can really get at contemporary issues in a way that if you did the opposite, if you just leapt into the class with the contemporary issue, that is where challenges and sometimes over emotion can happen. So if you begin with a historical context, looking at other instances of police brutality, other instances when young people have stood up and marched in the streets, then you can help kids make those connections to what's happening in the world today.
And Representative Ford, we've got about 30 seconds left, but some parts of this history can be traumatic. It's ugly history, some of it. Do you advocate for also teaching the positive parts of that history?
Absolutely. And I think that some of our founding fathers talked about the original sin of slavery, and they condemned it, even though they were a part of owning slaves. And after the Civil War, there was the Freedmen's Bureau. All of that guaranteed or was supposed to guarantee Black people the full freedom of America. And it hasn't happened. We haven't realized it. And so I think that we have to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of our history so that people are not miseducated.
Miles to walk before we sleep, as they say. Maureen Loughnane and Representative LaShawn Ford, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Bye-bye.
The Tuskegee Airmen were a group of primarily Black military pilots who fought in World War II. They are now being honored with a tribute that might find its way into your pocket soon. Here's a look. And in other news from the U.S. Mint also, the Biden administration announces its intention to follow through with the Obama-era plan to place abolitionist Harriet Tubman, on the $20 bill. Up next, the latest selection in our Black Voices Book Club in a conversation that originally aired on Chicago Tonight. In Illinois, there are more than 1,400 laws regulating the lives of people who are formerly incarcerated. That includes more than 1,000 employment regulations, 186 limiting political participation, and 21 housing statutes. The next selection in our Black Voices Book Club examines these laws and how they affect the lives of people with felonies once they are out of prison. The new book is called Halfway Home: Race, Punishment, and the Afterlife of Mass Incarceration. Joining us now with more is the author, Reuben Jonathan Miller, assistant professor at the University of Chicago Crown Family School of Social Work, Policy, and Practice. Reuben, welcome back. And I'm excited to talk to you about your book, so congratulations on that. What are some of the post-incarceration limits, all these laws that we just mentioned, that people have to deal with after they're released from prison?
Well, one of the major laws has to do with housing restrictions. So, for example, if someone with a felony record so much as visits someone in public housing, as of 1996, there's a federal guideline that suggests that the tenants can be evicted. And of course, there are housing restrictions both in public housing and in the private market, where landlords can evict people with criminal records or deny their applications without having any recourse. There's no recourse on the part of the person with the criminal record, even if they have the credit score. Additional laws on the books. It wasn't until about 2018 that there was a change in a restriction on people with criminal records, people with felony convictions specifically, not being able to get a barber's license or a cosmetology license. It took a legislative change to bring that about, despite them being trained to do so as barbers. And so there are hundreds of restrictions in the labor market and the housing market that make it close to impossible for people with criminal records to make a life for themselves after they return home without help from others.
And those rules, laws, statutes, obviously, they impact their families as well. You write about something called the economy of favors that folks who have been incarcerated previously depend on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there was the changes in liability laws beginning in 1980 that made it so employers, landlords, licensing officials, social service agencies could be sued if they provided care for someone with a criminal record. And the way that these entities responded was to restrict them from access to things like housing, employment, et cetera. Well, because a family member can be evicted, let's say, if a grandmother allows her grandson to sleep on the couch for an appreciable amount of time, what this does is this introduces a kind of tension. On the one hand, people with criminal records are made needy, and this is because of all these rules that prevent them from accessing the political economy. On the other hand, because of the punishments that get doled out onto family members, social service providers, employers, they're among the least desirable candidates to help. And so what they have to do to navigate what I call an economy of favors is convince people who are punished if they help them to, in fact, do them the favor of renting them an apartment, allowing them a place to stay, giving them a job, even if they're qualified.
And Reuben, like, just to play devil's advocate, is that supervision, all those rules that come after being incarcerated, are those not designed or intended to prevent recidivism or from putting someone, for example, a foster child, if that person should be living in the home of the foster child, preventing those folks from being harmed?
Some of them, for sure. Some of them were designed with this in mind, with recidivism reduction or public safety or something like that in mind. And some of these are just reflexive responses from policymakers who have learned to write out people we're afraid of from full participation in politics, in society, in culture. I'll give you an example. One rule that's implemented in almost every state in the country is that people with felony records can't sit on juries. Jury duty has nothing to do with like whether or not you'll commit a crime. But what ends up happening is when someone with a criminal record goes before a jury, it is almost never then a jury of their peers. And in fact, their prior criminal convictions are used against them. Prosecutors are allowed to charge them with extra charges because of something called sentencing enhancements. So on the one hand, they're restricted from being allowed for people who understand their experience from judging them, as it were, from being their jury. And on the other hand, their criminal records can put them away for much longer.
Now, Ruben, before we let you go, beyond your work as, a scholar and a social scientist, you have your own personal experiences with your father and your brother having been incarcerated. Why did you want to write this book?
It's interesting. I was born poor and Black in Chicago on the South Side after 1972, which is the year that mass incarceration begins in earnest. And so I've decided to write myself and my family into this story because I couldn't avoid the prison if I wanted to. The prison follows you. It's like a ghost, always there. And so I wanted to make sure that people understood not just whether or not someone can get a job, but what it's like to be a family member, to love someone who's had a criminal record, who's locked out of the political economy, and what it's like to be someone with a criminal record, though I don't have one, I write from the perspective of the hundreds of people that I spoke with, as they navigate these systems.
And we've got just a couple of seconds left. The book title, Halfway Home, it's a play on words.
Yes, absolutely. On the one hand, so I did about 3.5 years of participant observation in halfway houses in Chicago. So on the one hand, there's the halfway house itself. And on the other hand, it represents being stuck. What does it mean to never quite make it home? And home is something that we make for people. And the way to make home for people is to not think so much about public safety, but to think about belonging. What kind of society would we have if we constructed it in such a way that even people that we're afraid of have a place in it? This is the question I try to raise in this book.
All right, Ruben Jonathan Miller, thank you so much. Again, the book is called Halfway Home, Race, Punishment, and the Afterlife of Mass Incarceration. And again, my thanks to Ruben Jonathan Miller for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, a rediscovered interview from the WTTW show Our People. Stay with us. From 1968 to 1972, the late Jim Tilmon hosted a weekly program called Our People on WTTW. It focused on issues in the Black community and featured thoughtful and incisive interviews with Black newsmakers and entertainers of the era. Most of them have been lost over the years, but our library staff recently rediscovered a few that we are excited to bring to Black Voices throughout February. First up, a clip from a 1968 interview in which comedian and actor Godfrey Cambridge lends his thoughts on policing and crime in Chicago with his characteristic dry humor.
I was kind of intrigued by a little sign I picked up the other day called, it's called I Care, which I thought was kind of funny to pick up in a city in which the mayor said he was going to shoot down children. Because you begin to wonder. I saw somebody testing mace the other day and said, I'll take mace right in the eye, show everybody it's fun to have your lungs bunged. And it's a tragic society we live in which our only solution to anything is to send a police car or a mace or a National Guardsman. Our only solution in a world in which we can send something to the moon that weighs tons and send back pictures in which we can cure so many illnesses that all we can do to solve a problem is to send a police car. It's a little tragic. But I make for happiness in the world. I try to bring people joy. And I'm also secure enough to know that on a nightclub stage I'm a funny man. But I also am secure enough to know that you can't spend all of your time laughing, and off stage I devote myself to serious things, serious considerations, readings, etc., and writings.
Do you have a routine that you do that ties in with this?
Not off the top of the head, now that I think about it. Well, I do, oh yes, I do deal something with, they were always talking about the Negro crime rate, and which is a thing that delights me, because they're always talking about Negro crime rate, and basically I feel that Negroes are doing all right in violent crimes, but what I want to do is instruct my Negro brothers that they must move into non-violent crime where all the white people are, because that's where the money is, you see. See, because basically it's a little stupid to see a poor Negro hold-up man has to take the bus to go to work. Can't afford to take a cab, you see. And he waits there in that damp alley waiting for the guy to come by, catching rheumatism because it's damp, and can't breathe because he's got his wife's stocking pulled over his head, you see. All that to hit a guy in the head for $4, you see. Now you go over to our white brother and you see, never have you seen a Negro convicted of embezzling $5 million from a savings and loan association, running off to South America. Yet white people are doing it so often that Pan Am had to add 30 extra flights. And I would feel a great deal of security if counterfeiting, for example, were no longer an all-white crime. I'd feel pride, a sense of pride, if a colored brother walked over to me and laid a counterfeit one on me with a picture of Booker T on it.
Godfrey Cambridge with Jim Tilmon in 1968. And if that's not enough Godfrey for you, visit our website to see the full interview. Jermaine Anderson's mentoring organization, I Am a Gentleman, began as a one-day seminar to teach young men skills that would help them on their way to adulthood. Skills as simple as how to tie a necktie. But Anderson says the young men have much more to offer than just a dapper presentation. Tonight, Anderson gives us the last word on how to be a gentleman.
I Am a Gentleman Incorporated is a male mentoring and leadership development organization. We serve young men ages 13 to 21, not just in Chicago, but in the Chicagoland area. Our mission really is to empower, equip them, and make sure that they're prepared with life skills that they can use in the real world. We offer enrichment workshops, we offer dining and etiquette experiences, we offer, most of all, our Male Mentoring Academy. That academy teaches young men basic life skills, things such as how to respect women. What does it mean to become your own boss? Overcoming peer pressure, overcoming obstacles. Skills that we teach are skills that are not learned in the classroom, but skills that are necessary to help make you a marketable citizen of your community and make you productive in society. We have a strong focus on image day number one when the young men walk into our classroom. And of course, people tell us all the time, it's not about the image, it's not about the presentation, it's not about the way you look. But we beg to differ just a little bit. We've discovered that a young man who looks good then begins to feel good. And then once he feels good, he'll decide to make better choices in life and walk down a different path. It's amazing to see the expression of a young man when he walks in. He may not want to be there. You know, mom sent him to this program, teacher signed him up for this program. And the first thing that we do is put him in a white dress shirt and a necktie. Something that he's never worn before, but it's amazing to see how his confidence just shoots through the roof. And he's like, wow, this is me. I can be a leader. I look good. In addition to the male mentoring that we do at I Am a Gentleman, we have a strong focus on community service. During the pandemic, just like most organizations, we had to pivot. We discovered that it's not enough just for us to reach the young men that we serve, but we must reach families. Since March of 2020, our young men have been at the forefront. They have distributed more than 10,000 cloth face masks across the city in an effort to keep families and residents safe. They have made sure that families who are without have fresh groceries every weekend. They have provided warm meals every Sunday since the beginning of the pandemic. And we believe here at I Am a Gentleman that a gentleman is one who gives back, takes responsibility, and makes life better for someone else. So all of our programming will always fall under that umbrella of giving back, taking responsibility, and again, making sure that you're not only doing something for yourself, but whatever you're doing in life, make sure that it reaches someone else.
The last word from Jermaine Anderson. Be sure to check out our website to watch more from our The Last Word series. And that's our show for this Sunday night. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News, including developments in the fight over reopening Chicago public schools for in-person learning. And join Paris Schutz and me tomorrow at 7 on Chicago Tonight. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that's proud to serve its community through pro bono legal services.